We've all heard the word Big Pharma. Do you think there's such a thing as big archaeology?
No.
Oh, how odd.
The Greek, Egyptian, and Sumerian mythologies represent the three major pillars of ancient belief systems that have significantly shaped the human culture throughout history. The oral traditions associated with the Greek, Egyptian, and Sumerian gods extend far into the past of their eventual documentation in written form. One of these gods is the Egyptian god of wisdom and writing. This is the story of Thoth. Modern archaeology suggests that there are two different civilizations in prehistoric Egypt that existed before the end of the Ice Age. The first is the Kudan culture, existing in Upper Egypt from 13,000 to 9,000 BC. The Sibyllian, or Esna culture, existed in S1, Lower Egypt, from 13,000 to 10,000 BC. As we learned in the Edfu Temple of Horus, the ancestors of the ancient Egyptians were a shamanistic civilization called the Primeval Ones, who transitioned the ancient Egyptians from hunter-gatherers to permanent settlements of agriculture known as primeval mounds. It appears that the Primeval Ones claimed the Giza Plateau and built the pyramids and the Sphinx of Giza themselves. One of the Primeval Ones was the Egyptian god Thoth. Thoth is the Egyptian god of wisdom and writing that is depicted with the human body and the head of an ibis bird. The Egyptians themselves believed that writing was a gift from the god Thoth. A book called the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, the Atlantean, published in 1930, states that Thoth ruled Egypt from 52,000 BC to 36,000 BC and built the pyramids within those 16,000 years. But we'll come back to the Emerald Tablets. We're going to focus on Thoth's original story first. Thoth is known as the recording scribe of the deceased deeds in the Book of the Dead, where he provides a fair assessment during the judgment process of the deceased's soul in the afterlife. The Book of the Dead is a collection of spells and texts that were used by the ancient Egyptians to guide the deceased through the afterlife. These texts were not compiled into a single book, but exist in various versions across different papyri. The best collection of the Book of the Dead can be found at the British Museum in London. I traveled there on my way back from Egypt and recorded the Book of the Dead so you could see it. These manuscripts contain spells that invoke Thoth's assistance during the judgment process and the journey throughout the Duat, which is the underworld. The journey through the Duat itself is fraught with challenges and obstacles that the soul must navigate before reaching Osiris for judgment. Now, in terms of judgment, Osiris presides over the weighing of the souls. The Egyptians believed that the mummification process preserved the body to anchor their spirit during judgment to prevent from being lifted into limbo eternally wandering the Duat, or to face annihilation. After navigating the Duat, a ceremony takes place in the hall called the Hall of Two Truths, where an individual's heart will be weighed against the feather of Ma'at. Ma'at represents truth, balance, order, and justice. If the heart is heavier than the feather, the soul will be destroyed by Ammit, the destroyer of souls. She's a soul eater who consumes the souls of sinners. If the heart was lighter or equal to the feather, the soul will be deemed worthy to enter Aru, also known as the Field of Reeds, a paradise-like realm where they can live eternally in peace. Once you pass the weighing of the souls, it is said that the individual's spiritual essence reunites with their mummified body and transcends into an immortal being that enters Aru, rather than implying any physical reanimation of corpses in any literal sense. The state of the physical body does not matter anymore after an individual enters Aru. They exist in a spiritual form free of earthly constraints and concerns associated with their formal physical existence. The process of mummification proves that the ancient Egyptians had sophisticated medical techniques to dissect and preserve human bodies. But this is how the Egyptian afterlife story is told. You don't have to believe this to find it interesting. It's just nice to step into their shoes and try to see it from their perspective. And now you know Thoth's role in the Egyptian afterlife story. The god Thoth was the recording scribe of the Book of the Dead. But as Egypt fell under Greeks' rule during the Hellenistic period from 323 BC to 30 BC, this period of time was when Alexander the Great conquered Egypt and Greek culture spread throughout the country. The Greeks began to identify their deities with those of the Egyptians based on shared attributes and functions through a process known as interpreo-graekia. During this time, Thoth was equated with the Greek god Hermes and evolved into Hermes Trismegistus. It was at this time that Thoth became very cool. He was tasked with bringing knowledge to humanity and left behind the emerald tablets in the Great Pyramid of Giza. It is said that these emerald tablets of Thoth established the foundation to the advanced knowledge of the ancient Egyptians. But it brings up a question. What are the emerald tablets? And if they are real, what is the earliest known translation? So I'm going to run you through it one time. The Emerald Tablets of Thoth is a specific text. It's like a chapter in a book, within the broader collection of the Hermetic texts known as the Hermetica. There are 5 translations. The first original language is the Atlantean language, which is likely the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. The next translation, in 201 BC, the Hermetica is the first Greek translation originating from Egypt, attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, and includes a short text summary called the Shmargandine Table, which means emerald tablets. The next translation is Arabic. In 901 AD, the Arabic translation of the Hermetica is called the Book of Secrets of Creation. It includes the emerald tablets as an appendix in the treatise. The next translation is Latin. In 1200 AD, the Latin translation of the Hermetica is called the Corpus Hermeticum and includes the emerald tablets under the name Tabula Shmargandina. The next translation is in English. In 1930 AD, the English translation of the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, the Atlantean, was published by Maurice Doreal. In 1925 AD, Maurice Doreal found the Emerald Tablets abandoned by Egyptian priests that had migrated to Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, and this was located beneath an altar of the sun god. Maurice collected the tablets and made a copy to translate them later on, and then he was tasked to return the physical Emerald Tablets back to the Great Pyramid of Giza. And then in 1930, we got his publication. Now, something I'd like to note is that the English translation of the Emerald Tablets has gained more popularity over the Greek, Arabic, and Latin translations because the teachings of the Emerald Tablets are perceived by the readers as a more comprehensive and more profound body of work on various topics such as the laws of nature, cosmology, esoteric knowledge, spiritual enlightenment, and alchemy. Now, before 332 BC, the esoteric knowledge was hidden from the general public and considered classified information. Only Egyptian pharaohs, kings, priests, and elite classes had access to the Emerald Tablets in order to prevent widespread enlightenment that could challenge existing power structures. Now, from 332 BC to around 700 AD, the transition from classified information to available to the general public occurred gradually throughout various stages in the Greek occupation, the Roman occupation, and through the rise of Christianity in Egypt. But after 700 AD, in order to get a government job in Egypt, the government required public officials to know Arabic and to believe in Islam. When this happened, everything changed. The Emerald Tablets represent a reinterpretation or expansion upon earlier Hermetic texts infused with contemporary esoteric thought. In the ancient Egyptian worldview at that time, people did not read the Emerald Tablets literally as it was written because it was interpreted as metaphors through philosophical lenses. This is why alchemy is like a spiritual alchemy when you're reading this. But the Emerald Tablets are now available to everyone around the world. The book published in 1930 called The Emerald Tablets of Thoth, the Atlantean, written by Maurice Doreal, is the book that I'm sourcing for my interpretation of the Egyptian god Thoth. I encourage you to read this book multiple times and to keep a copy of it on your bookshelf at home.